Dollar, dollar, dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack to flip for my foes. Dollar, 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 dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar, 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 dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yup, what's good, original crew? It's your boy DJ Dookie, your girl.
Sierra Nicole. Back
on the channel with more Mr. Ballen, man. We got the weirdest murder motive ever. You see? Weirdest and ever, all caps.
I see it.
Yeah.
That's how
weirdest
you know.
Ever. Solved Mysteries episode
3.
3 of them things. So with that being said, man, we ain't gonna hold y'all, man. Make sure you check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go if you want the first part. You gotta do it, check out down below. Also, if you enjoyed today's video, what?
Liking it with a thumbs up.
As always, don't be a stupidity. Doopity boopity bop. Boop boop. Smack that like button and make it go boop boop.
Okay.
Or just boop. You don't need to, cause then
okay, then you
or
just
boop boop boop.
Okay, just smack
That's
the like button.
That's 3. So you leave.
Y'all just smack the like button, please. Please.
It's cool when they do it. It's a problem when I do it.
Okay, come on.
The clue that finally solved this murder was right in front of everyone the whole time, but it would take almost a decade and the intervention of a secret crime-solving society for investigators to finally understand its disturbing significance. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please recrust the like button's Smucker's Uncrustables. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our video uploads. All right, let's get into today's story. Classes began at Drexel University in Philadelphia on the morning of November 30th, 1984. Students walking into Randall Hall made a gruesome discovery. Crumpled at the bottom of an outdoor stairwell underneath a gray jacket was the body of a young woman. She had cuts and bruising all over her face, and she had a deep purple line that went all around her neck from where she had been strangled to death. She had no purse, no backpack, nothing to identify her. There was no evidence of sexual assault because she was fully clothed, although she was missing her shoes and socks. Police immediately cordoned off the area. Their first suspicion was this was a robbery that turned deadly. But right away, the police knew they were in for a very difficult investigation because 1, there were no cameras inside or outside of Randall Hall, so they couldn't just review the footage to see what happened to Debbie. And 2, there was a virtually unlimited number of suspects because Drexel University was not an isolated campus. Its buildings were integrated into West Philadelphia, and Randall Hall itself was located right along a known cut-through that residents that lived in and around Drexler would use almost every single day. And it was clear this—
No lie, I hate colleges like this. Like, I like my college. I never seen your campus, so I don't know how your campus is made up. But I like my campus because my campus was just secluded in its own little area. You know what I mean? There's no really, like, community, like, it's the campus. You go into the land, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's how ours was.
Y'all was like that too? But, like, say for instance, like Lane College. You got the neighborhood, the hoods right here. Like, you go trap house, the trap here, like, ain't number, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't really like that. Or, like, how they say chat is. I heard chat, like, I've never been to chat, but I always hear how people describe chat. And I'm like, it's kind of ass because, like, the streets and everything, the roads and all that, you know what I'm saying? It ain't like, I hate when it's developing to the community. Yeah. I like the campus to just be itself. Lower crime rate, I'm looking at it like. Or the crime control.
That residents that lived in and around Drexler would use almost every single day. And it was clear this young woman had not been killed in this stairwell. She had been killed elsewhere and then dragged a great distance, losing her shoes in the process before being dumped at this spot. But just a couple of hours after the body was discovered, the police received a lucky break when a young man who was combative and frantic rushed the closed-off crime scene and demanded he be let through because he said he knew the identity of the dead girl. The police were immediately suspicious because they didn't even know who this dead girl was. So they pull the young man aside and they interview him, and he tells police his name is Kurt Rayner, he's a student at Drexel University, and he believes the girl they had found, the dead girl, was his girlfriend, 20-year-old Debbie Wilson, who was also a student. And then he proceeded to give police a very long and complicated explanation of how he figured out the girl inside was his girlfriend. He said the night before he was with Debbie in Randall Hall in the computer lab in the basement. He said Debbie had a big project that was due the next day and that he had offered to just keep her company while she worked. But by about 1:30 in the morning, Debbie still had a lot of work to do, and Kurt said he was just really tired and didn't know if he could stay awake any longer, and so he asked Debbie if it would be okay if he took off early. Debbie said it was totally fine. She was used to working late at this computer lab, and Kurt, even though he wanted to stick around and walk her safely to her car when she was done, he felt like she was okay, and so he took off on his own. On his walk back to the dorm, Kurt said he passed by a campus security guard, and he actually asked him if he wouldn't mind checking on his girlfriend in the computer lab because she was all alone and it was late, and the security guard said, no problem, I'll make sure she's okay. The next morning when Kurt woke up, he heard rumors from other students on campus about a woman's body being found just outside of Randall Hall, and that apparently it looked like murder. Kurt said he didn't think much of it at first, but that day when he went into campus to meet up with Debbie, he saw her car still parked in the computer lab parking lot, looking like it had never left. And then when he got to the meeting site, Debbie never showed. And he said it was at that point that he realized the dead woman in Randall Hall must be Debbie. And he wasn't wrong, it was Debbie, but the police were not buying his story. He was the last person to see Debbie alive, and by his own admonition, he had heard that morning about a dead woman being found at Randall Hall, the very place he had left his girlfriend the night before all alone. But it took him hours to bring this up to anyone. The police also noticed he had bruises on his knuckles and a deep cut between his fingers. Suddenly, Kurt seemed like the killer, and this crime that initially looked like a robbery gone wrong now looked like something much more personal. Strangulation is intimate. The killer almost always is face to face with their victim, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of rage. And afterwards, the killer had covered Debbie's body with her jacket, an act that indicated remorse or even respect. And investigators know that generally when a woman is murdered, her romantic partner is the culprit. Instead of tipping off Kurt that they were looking at him as the primary suspect, they told him to go back to his dorm room and they would be in touch with him as the investigation developed. In the meantime, investigators turned their attention to the computer lab in Randall Hall, where Kurt said Debbie had been last. Debbie had logged into a computer at the front of the lab, but had not logged out. Her computer cursor was left blinking mid-sentence at 1:38 a.m., leading investigators to believe she was interrupted by her attacker inside of the lab. Investigators found 2 extension cords on the ground near this computer that matched the ligature marks on Debbie's neck. They also found a small spot of blood on the back of Debbie's chair that they sent off for testing. As police swept the computer lab, they began commenting on how neat everything looked, considering that there must have been some sort of death struggle that took place in there. And that's when they realized there had been a huge setback in this case. The janitor that morning had cleaned the computer lab and the hall right outside, likely destroying critical physical evidence. They interviewed the janitor, who had a rock-solid alibi and was incredibly remorseful at unintentionally destroying the crime scene. And so they asked the janitor, before you cleaned it up, was there anything strange about the computer lab or the hallway right outside of the computer lab? And the janitor said no, it was all normal, but she did say it looked like the tables and chairs had been moved around inside of the computer lab, but it didn't stand out to her because it always looked that way when she went.
But my thing is, did you not see the body, or are you the janitor that discovered the body?
They drug.
Oh, no, you're right.
They
They
drug
drugged her
the body out.
Yeah.
And she was found under
True.
the stairs.
True.
Yeah,
My bad. I did. I was just trying to put a lot of stuff. Is it possible that the boyfriend possibly have done it?
I mean, at the end of the day, regardless if that is the case, or if it's not the case, I should say, you still got to look at him. He was the last person seen, the last person to be with her. You know what I'm saying? So you do have to definitely look at him. Because
I'm also thinking about the times 1984, cameras.
And do what you got to do to rule him out.
Yeah.
But
was cameras even heavily used back then? Which I know they said a camera wasn't, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So they didn't have cameras as evidence. But logging, how did y'all keep up with student logins then?
Yeah, that too.
Is it a possibility somebody could have logged into another computer to make her calm, or did he just go in with the intentions to murder her And if that's the case, then y'all wouldn't have a student login. I'm just trying to think of other possibilities.
I'm wondering, like, did the security guard see anything or see anyone lurking around campus, or
because
did you hear anything? Like,
who's the security guard on duty that night? Y'all could ask him, hey, did he?
If there really was a security guard outside that.
Well, you can always check. You can check.
Yeah, you can check to see if anyone was on duty that night, where their whereabouts,
were they patrolling? Did y'all happen to patrol where he said?
Because even though the boyfriend said that he asked the security guard, can he make sure? We still don't know for sure.
And we don't even know for sure if the security guard even went that way to check.
Yeah, we don't know.
Clean it up. Because the police lacked physical evidence, they couldn't just go arrest Kurt, even though they wanted to. And so instead, they asked him if he'd be willing to come down to the station for a formal interview, and he said he would. During the interview, Kurt insisted he had nothing to do with Debbie's death. As for the bruises and cut on his hand, he said he had punched a wall after finding out what had happened to Debbie, and the cut in the middle of his fingers was from working on his car. But neither of those things could be proven. After this interview yielded no new results, and they still had no evidence on Kurt, they told him he could go, and in the interim, they began digging into his alibi. Kurt had previously told police that after leaving Debbie in the computer lab, on his walk back to his dorm, he had passed a security guard and asked that security guard to check on Debbie. And so the police were able to track down that security guard who confirmed Kurt's alibi. The security guard's name was Bryce Clapman, who was a longtime employee of Drexel University with a stellar work record and no criminal history. Clapman said he spoke with Kurt around 1:30 in the morning as Kurt was walking back towards the dorms. After speaking with Kurt, Clapman radioed Bronson Ziegler, who was one of the 2 security guards that were working in Randall Hall that night, and he told him that he or the other guy, David Dixon, would need to go down into the basement and check on this girl. Shortly after radioing Ziegler, Clapman would say he saw a person, presumably a student, come out of Randall Hall. He said he was just too far away and it was too dark that he couldn't make out any features, but he definitely saw someone walking around the premise around 1:30 in the morning. Clapman told...
But you a security guard, well, I guess you don't... I would say, well... was y'all security ever, like, strict? Like, press them on y'all?
Not really. Like, if you weren't doing anything, like, because people are on campus at that time, as long as, like, the labs and the libraries, like, still open, like, you on campus, you know what I'm saying? Like, they not, like, pressing you. Like, if nothing has been reported, or if you're not doing anything, or you not looking, you know what I'm saying?
Sometimes they, like, what I'm thinking is, if somebody looks suspicious, do you approach them? Because you're on a college campus?
Well, he didn't necessarily say that he looked suspicious. He just said that he's seen someone coming out of... It's not necessarily that he looks suspicious, because he looks like a student as well. But who knows? He just didn't see his face.
I got you.
Of Randall Hall. He said he was just too far away and it was too dark that he couldn't make out any features, but he definitely saw someone walking around the premise around 1:30 in the morning. Clapman told police he never stepped foot inside of Randall Hall that night and that he was willing to take a lie detector test. Police ran the backgrounds of Bronson Ziegler and David Dixon. Dixon was a military veteran with a pristine record who was still in the Army Reserves. As for Ziegler, he had spent time in jail for burglary and had actually lied about it to get his job as a security guard. When police interviewed Ziegler, he was evasive and frustrated, and he said that he did receive the message from Clapman to go check on the girl, but he didn't feel like doing it himself, so he radioed Dixon and said he should go do it. Ziegler insisted he had done his rounds properly and he had never stepped foot inside of the computer lab. He told detectives they could check his security guard clock that he carried with him every time he did rounds, which was basically like a punch card where there was designated stations along his security rounds where he would punch this card that stamped a time that he had arrived at that station. And so over the course of the night, he would punch his card at each of these stations, and there was a record of what time he arrived and what time he left. And so when they checked this record, it showed that Ziegler had hit all the stations at the correct time. But that didn't mean he didn't kill her, because there was lots of time in between rounds that he could have attacked her. Towards the end of the interview, Ziegler accused detectives of messing with him, and then he sarcastically said he had killed Debbie, and then he refused to take a lie detector test. When the police interviewed Dixon, he said that Ziegler had never radioed him asking him to check on the girl in the computer lab. However, he did say he was aware of someone working late in the computer lab because around 2:15 in the morning he had walked past and the lights were on and he heard the sound of printers working inside. And so not wanting to disturb whoever was in there, he didn't even poke his head in. He just figured he would come back in a couple hours and make sure they were gone. And so,
but then the mouse picks up that she stopped around
1:38. 1:38.
But you said you heard the printer at 2 something. Then that means somebody else might. Well, I'll say this.
I mean,
she could have been killed and moved, and maybe
someone else went down there and was printing something out and left.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying, and not maybe thinking that the person is gonna come back for their belongings.
Did they ever have people like stationed at y'all computer labs like overnight?
What you mean?
Because I'm trying to remember, because we used to have a certain computer lab, but there was always an attendant there at all times. Even like overnight.
To be honest with you,
can't remember.
I can't remember.
Because I'm not talking about the library. I'm talking about like we had this actual like, if you didn't want to go to the library, it was this another like computer area. It wasn't inside the library. It was in a business joint.
Yeah, and something like that.
Yeah, it was. But it had hella computers and stuff over there too, and printers, and you could go over there.
Yeah.
But I remember it used to like 2 people. It was always there. One on, because it was 2 entrances.
I feel like
2 exits, so one was over here.
I'm trying to like remember, but I do feel like someone was always we did have like a little area like that, and you can go and like print stuff off and do like little stuff like that. And they always had someone working at all times.
The next couple of hours, he chatted on the phone with his girlfriend.
Let me take it back.
In a couple hours and make sure they were gone. And so over the next couple of hours, he chatted on the phone with his girlfriend, and then around 4 in the morning, he went back down to the computer lab and the lights were off and the door was locked. And so he figured whoever had been in there had finished up and left, and Ziegler had locked up after them. When asked why he or Ziegler had not discovered Debbie's body, he said their security rounds did not leave the building, and so that stairwell was considered outside of the building, and so they never would have seen her. At this point, Clapman and Dixon were ruled out as suspects, but Ziegler became a primary suspect. But just as with the boyfriend, Kurt Rayner, there was no physical evidence tying Ziegler to the crime, and so they couldn't arrest him. Investigators decided instead to try to track down that person Clapman had seen walking around Randall Hall around 1:30 in the morning after speaking with Kurt and after radioing Ziegler. It would turn out to be 28-year-old PhD student Ashlyn Berhard, who was known for keeping long hours and was also known for sneaking up behind the female secretaries that worked in his office and suddenly holding a pencil up to their neck and threatening to kill them. His office also happened to be directly above where Debbie's body was ultimately found inside of that stairwell. When interviewed by police, Ashlyn said he had been in Randall Hall the night Debbie had been killed, but didn't know Debbie, had no interaction with her, and didn't leave his office the whole night. He quickly agreed to take a lie detector test, but he failed it. Scrambling to explain it, he named 2 other students that were in the office with him that could be his alibi. But when police spoke to these 2 other students, they said, no, Ashlyn was not in the office the whole time. He left around 1 in the morning and was gone for about 3 hours. He said he was going to take a nap. When the police approached Ashlyn with this information, he said, oh, you know what? I forgot to tell you about my nap. Yes, I left for a few hours. I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, went back inside, and slept in one of the study hall rooms. But besides that, I was inside of that building for a full 24 hours, and I never saw Debbie. I had no interaction with her. It's just coincidence that my nap coincided with when she was killed. But detectives were not buying it. They believed wholeheartedly that now, finally, they had found their killer. But just like with Kurt and with Ziegler, they had no physical evidence tying Ashlyn to the crime, and so they couldn't arrest him. And because they were not able to make any arrests, the police just continued to look for more suspects. And so they began speaking to some of Debbie's friends and acquaintances, and it came out that Debbie actually had a stalker. It was another student named Alan Smith, who had previously been one of Debbie's very close friends, but at some point he wanted to take the relationship from platonic to romantic, and Debbie rejected him. Alan apparently didn't take this very well and took to following Debbie around campus, trying to get her to stop and talk to him and try to reconcile their relationship, but Debbie every time would just say no, and Alan got increasingly more angry about it, and just the day before Debbie was killed, their friends saw Debbie fighting with Alan in the middle of campus where Alan had actually grabbed her shoulder and was shaking her and yelling at her. Police tracked down Alan, and he was cooperative and said he did not kill Debbie, but he didn't have an alibi. He just said he was alone in his apartment on the night that Debbie was killed. And so, like all the other primary suspects in this case, there was no physical evidence tying Allen to the crime, and so they couldn't make an arrest. Around this time, the lab that tested the blood spatter that was on Debbie's chair inside of the computer lab came back with their results. DNA profiling was not available back then, so all they could provide was blood type. The blood type that came back from that little spot was type A, and Debbie's blood was type O, meaning this blood spot likely belonged to Debbie's killer, who during their struggle must have gotten wounded and then bled on the chair. And so right away, the police got Kurt Rayner, Bronson Ziegler, Ashlyn Bearhard, and Alan Smith to all come in and provide a blood sample, and they figured if any one of them was type A, that they probably were the killer. But unbelievably, when their test results came back in, none of them were type A. It was a crushing blow to the investigation. The first few days after Debbie's killing seemed so full of promising leads, but now with this blood type development, investigators had no suspects, and all of a sudden the Drexel community was starting to panic. Students were outraged at the light security and wondered why the security guards were not allowed to carry weapons. The administration put up a $10,000 reward for any information about who could have done this, and the president of the university told students to use the buddy system and never be alone on campus because he believed the killer was one of us. No one could understand why anyone would want to target Debbie in the first place. She seemed like such a wonderful person that was nice to everyone. She had modeled in high school, but she wasn't vain. She'd actually turned down getting braces because she was worried it might affect her clarinet playing. She was an average student, but she had an uncommon drive. She worked really hard to get good grades. Whenever she was feeling down or wasn't feeling motivated, she would stare at a picture of a Mercedes-Benz car that was there to inspire her and remind her what she could achieve if she continued to work hard. When she was killed, that picture of the Mercedes-Benz still hung above her desk. It was ultimately her work ethic that put her in danger because she was prepared to stay at that computer lab as long as it took to make sure her project was perfect. The few pieces of physical evidence the police had didn't fit together. The crime wasn't really a robbery. While she was missing her shoes and socks, her backpack had turned up at the campus lost and found about a week later, and no one knows how it got there or who put it there. Inside, it appeared all of her belongings were still there. Also, when she was discovered, she was still wearing her expensive watch. Her murder looked personal, but the police could not prove that someone who actually knew her was the one who killed her. Police considered a few other suspects, but like all the others, there wasn't enough evidence to make any arrests, and so eventually, Debbie's case went cold.
I think somebody tried to make it look like a robbery, but whoever kills her, I do believe it was personal, the way they left her.
I mean, but did they really make it look like a robbery because they didn't take anything?
But they took her backpack. They took her...
It wasn't that they probably took the backpack. The backpack probably was, like, probably either left or lost in the struggle. Like, we just know it turned up and lost and found. But... we don't know if someone actually took it. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
And who turned it in and where did y'all find it at if y'all actually found it? You know what I'm saying?
But I still think whoever did the crime knows. Or it could have just been, I don't know, you guys, some people are sick and got weird MOs anyway.
Yeah, and with it being so many people, like, in the same vicinity around, like, the time that she, you know, it's so hard to, like, pinpoint.
And
like,
nobody heard anything.
You know what I'm saying? No one heard anything.
You had too much. And whoever did it, if it's not your boyfriend, they saw your boyfriend leave you. Because not too long after, that's when they attacked.
Right. So it has to have been somebody that was watching you, knew that you were down there, watched you go in there, and
or just came across the opportunity. Or it could
have just been random. You know, I don't know, but.
In 1985, the Philadelphia Inquirer ran a story about unsolved cases that most haunted detectives, and Debbie's was one of them. Some of the detectives that were involved in the case said they believed this was a random killing and that the killer would most likely strike again. Debbie's case eventually disappeared from headlines, and it languished for 8 years. And then, in the spring of 1992, Debbie's murder was assigned to a cold case squad led by Detective Bob Snyder, and desperate to crack the case, Snyder threw a Hail Mary. He took the case to the VDOC Society, which is a private and highly selective club of geniuses from all walks of criminology. Homicide detectives, prosecutors, defense attorneys, FBI agents, forensic scientists, even an aeronautic physicist. They came from all over the world for these monthly closed-door sessions where they would talk about these unsolvable cases and try to solve them. So in one of their monthly closed-door sessions, Detective Snyder stood in front of the Vidocq Society and laid out the details of Debbie Wilson's murder. Then he opened the floor to questions, and for hours the society got nowhere. Then Richard Walter, who was a founding member of the society, said that he had a theory. Walter was a famous criminal psychologist who had profiled some of the world's most infamous killers. Most of his work is actually still confidential. He believed the killer was a power-assertive, macho-type guy that liked being in control. Walter pointed to one clue that detectives and everyone seemed to have overlooked after all these years, and that was Debbie's missing shoes. He said the missing shoes were not random, they were the most important clue. The killer, Walter predicted, was a foot fetishist. Detective Snyder had nothing else to go on, and he was really intrigued by this idea, so he brought the information back to the cold case squad and they began re-interviewing everybody involved in the case. When they spoke with the manager of the computer lab at Randall Hall, he told them he was always bothered by one particular detail. The printers in the lab always turned off after 10 p.m., and so he was always confused how the security guard David Dixon could have heard the sound of printers inside the lab at 2:15 in the morning like he claimed. Detectives were shocked. Somehow no one had picked up on this discrepancy. They began looking more closely at David Dixon, who had been ruled out as a suspect and was viewed by and large as this pristine military veteran with no criminal history, and they dug all the way to the back of his military file where they discovered in 1979, the first year he was in the service, he had gotten in trouble for stealing another soldier's white Reebok sneakers, the exact type of shoe that Debbie was known to wear. Police began interviewing Dixon's former and current neighbors, and at least 4 women reported having a break-in when Dixon was living next to them, and the only thing missing was their white sneakers and dirty socks, although none of these women actually ever found out who was responsible. When they raided Dixon's apartment, they found in one of his closets 20 sets of used women's white shoes that were all wrapped in plastic like they were trophies. They also found 77 homemade videos, presumably shot by Dixon, that are just filming the feet of women walking around in white shoes. Dixon's alibi on the night that Debbie was killed was that most of the time he was on the phone with his girlfriend. His girlfriend had become his wife, and then she became his ex-wife. And so when detectives spoke to her, she told them that they had only spoke for a couple of minutes that night, not for a couple of hours. Police arrested Dixon in June of 1993, and he never admitted to anything, but as soon as he got into his cell, he started bragging to his cellmate about how he had killed Debbie because he wanted to have his way with her feet, and his cellmate immediately told on him. Dixon was ultimately found guilty of killing Debbie Wilson, and he was sentenced to life in prison. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments what it is and where you found it, so give us the timestamp.
That was weird. But when we paused it, I said, how did you possibly hear the printers going off if nobody was in the computer lab?
If no one else logged in.
No one else.
Because when y'all looked at this log, y'all could see that her cursor never moved, or it just stayed at 138. It stopped. No activity. No one else logged in. You have to log in on the computer because we had.
But it's 1984.
But you had to log in. There was no other activity on the computer. So
that's why I was trying to, even when I brought up the login thing, can y'all track and see who else had possibly logged in to the computer?
Right.
Also, could y'all possibly had tracked to see if her boyfriend at the time had logged in and logged out? Then you would have been able to see when, you know what I'm saying? Also, like I said, if you heard the computers going off, the printer going off at 2-something in the morning,
right,
you should have checked the login to see if anybody else was in there, because then we can go and we can investigate who possibly was in the computer lab at 2-something in the morning, and then y'all can go investigate them and see if they saw anything. Because now, if somebody else was in the computer lab and they heard the printers and stuff going off, then now they were setting the computers off. They are now a suspect as well because you are somewhere around the crime scene. They dropped the ball on that part because they would have also threw off bro alibi. Because the David guy, because y'all would have then been able to determine, hey, you said you heard the printers going off at 2-something, but nobody was on the computers at 2-something in the morning. So how could you possibly hear the printers going off if nobody was in the computer lab at this time? Her last click, because to be honest, in college, The computers monitor every single thing. They know when this mug is moving and when this mug is solid still because they just tracking everything.
You kind of have to.
Yeah.
Not counting. You do have to.
So they track every movement you do on them computers and who's making those movements.
Right.
So they know. That's how they notice. But you kind of threw me off of that idea where you said, hey, they could have killed her, moved her over here, and then somebody else could have went in the computer lab at the time. And I was like,
well, I shouldn't have threw you off of that. You should have kept what you said. The only reason I said that is because they had already made it clear that her body was moved from that location at a certain time. Her boyfriend left
it wasn't. No, they never said that her body was moving at a certain time. They just said the killing happened at a certain time.
Right. Okay. The killing happened at a certain time. The only reason I'm saying this is because her boyfriend left at 1:30. Mm-hmm. No more activity was done on her computer. It stopped at 1:38. So at the time that her boyfriend told, hey, my girlfriend's down here by herself, can you keep an eye out for her and make sure she's cool and she get, And then he seen, oh, she's alone. There was an opportunity for him.
Yeah, because when her boyfriend Kurt told Bryce, who was the head security, Bryce then told Ziegler. Ziegler then told David because Ziegler didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. So David, all right, whatever, bro, I'll go check. And he told Ziegler already told him, hey, I don't want to do it. So David already know, hey, Ziegler don't want to do it, so he's not gonna come over here. So he won't hear anything. Mm-hmm. Bryce already cut him off, and he sent them to.
And he the head. He like, y'all gonna do what one of y'all gonna go make this,
So David saw a clear opportunity.
There was an opportunity.
A white girl here by herself. She rocking the shoes that I'm infatuated with.
Or not even just that, just a young lady here by, just a young lady, period. Because like
I'm just saying, because
your size probably compared to her was just.
Oh, like, he's military background.
And you have military background. So
all the strength.
You know what I'm saying? Like, just period. You're going to overpower her. And also,
it just wasn't in his records to fit the MO. But he fits the MO after you think about it.
After you dig.
Yeah.
And you find out this information. Also, if anything, you snuck up behind her. Or even if you came in and she turned around, oh, that's security.
So she's not
even seeing you as a threat. You know what I'm saying? You doing what you doing your job.
Hey, just checking, making rounds. Or he could have told her, hey, your boyfriend wanted us to come in and check on you. Oh, I'm fine, okay. Just let us know,
Like who?
And then he saw this course there. He just hurry up.
Who knows?
And she probably didn't.
Like how?
And they didn't test his blood type. Because they ruled him out.
They ruled him out from the jump because he said he never even went that way.
So they only checked certain people.
Yeah.
That's crazy. You should have checked everybody that was involved in possibility.
Yeah. I mean, from the boyfriend all the way down to
every security guard to the stalker.
Every to the stalker.
Friend
Who
group.
else? The guy that y'all end up finding out, which they did do that, finding out that was who was lurking around, walking around.
Oh yeah, the 28-year-old.
Yeah, even him. Y'all tested all them, but
he just came out sketch because I was like, you went missing for several hours talking about, I forgot to tell y'all what to say.
It be situations like that, you know what I'm saying? Like, it'd be like little bitty things that you have to make sure, especially when you're dealing with something like this, that you have to make sure, baby, you better be remembering stuff because it could be the smallest thing that could end up getting you caught up or locked up in something you had nothing to do with.
But you would have never thought it was David, though.
Never.
The only thing, and it was a key factor that threw his whole story off. If he never said anything about the printers, y'all wouldn't even probably have thought or second guess that of him.
Who wouldn't have?
The cops, because reason why they second guessed him is because he initially said the printer was going off around 2:15.
Yeah.
They went back and interviewed the person that's over the computer lab, and they said they shut the printers off at 10 o'clock.
At 10.
So nobody can print. That is true.
Right. So
because in my old when I was in college, after a certain time you could not print, and I think it was after midnight. If you ain't print,
it was midnight for
if you ain't go over there and print, you like, damn, bro, I gotta wait till the morning. You better
be making sure you got everything. You got something to print, baby. You better be getting over there.
They
before
did
midnight.
shut them printers down before a certain time.
Yeah,
I forgot all about that. Because I was like, that's bizarre, y'all shut y'all printers down. But I forgot, in colleges, they do. You can be on a computer
Yeah,
but you can't print
you
nothing
out.
out.
Nothing. You better save it to a drive or something.
But I think in the library they didn't shut it down, but in the computer labs, they shut it down at a certain point. Damn, it was key points.
It was the smallest details that you had to like listen, pay attention, all of that. But even the people, what was the team called? Did you write that down? The genius team. I'm just gonna call them geniuses. I can't remember what the team was called, but the team.
I was gonna write it down.
It was like even with all of them, like listening to the case and still coming up with nothing. There's one guy. He
thought about foot fetish. He didn't pick up on the printer thing. Well, they really couldn't go off of that because they didn't get that information until to 8 years later of when the cutoff time for the printers.
Right.
So they wouldn't have the geniuses wouldn't even have got that.
Right.
Because that was a key detail.
But then when you think he was still on to something with the fetish. If it was a foot fetish or a shoe fetish. I don't know what type of fetish he had.
That was the weirdest murder motive.
Weirdest. And then when you go and you like, okay, if we're going to go off of this fetish, let's dig into everything.
Fetish, bro.
And then oh my gosh. And then you have oh my gosh, that's such a coincidence that she was wearing like the same shoes that
probably sparked your interest in. You got a fetish for white Reebok sneakers, bro. You are weird. And I wonder, is this your first murder? Because he bragged about it. I think it was his first one. Because he possibly would have told his cellie of other things he have done.
But then you film women's feet as well. That's weird to me that you watching.
Because he was just breaking their houses though.
And stealing their shoes and you keep them. That's like souvenirs. That's so.
I wonder did they ever, because he had so many pair of shoes, I wonder did they find her shoes.
Right, I do wonder that, yeah.
Because he had a whole collection.
And let me say this, the reason why I didn't think about the shoe thing, because in the beginning, I guess I had misheard that it was both shoes and socks missing. I don't know why, in my head, I thought he just said one shoe and a sock was missing, but it was actually both of them.
And he said he could have his way with her feet.
So he could have his way. So he did have a foot fetish. He had a foot fetish.
So what did you actually do?
Well, we know he filmed.
Probably filmed her feet, but did you do anything sexual?
That's weird.
That's the only thing. I'm weird. Like,
I don't even want to think about that. It's a possibility, though. Like, rest in peace to her.
But I'm glad. I wish I could have caught him earlier because ain't no telling what could have. He possibly, to be real, it was 8 years between. You got away with a murder.
For
8 years. What's this, your first murder? Also, during these 8 years, you never murdered anyone else again, knowing that you had got away with it. And if it wasn't for the geniuses thinking about that situation,
yeah.
Even if you didn't have to be real, they still wouldn't caught you if you didn't say the thing about the printer.
Or
that's what led them to you.
Or possibly they wouldn't have called him if they didn't go all the way back and dig all the way deeper into his military history. Realize
the only thing, with that, it triggered them to look more into him because now we caught you lying. We caught you on a lie. So if you lying about hearing the printers and you have nothing to do with it, what else could you be hiding?
And then also the girlfriend too was another.
But they should have checked that alibi when he called.
The initial police should have did that. Like it shouldn't have took 8 years in his team to be like, we're gonna they should initially did that. But then I don't know.
Cause that's y'all could have easily caught him in 2 lies.
And then also my thing is, why wouldn't y'all tested 2 security guards' blood? Why wouldn't y'all test him? Everyone was there that night. Anyone that was on the campus around there. I don't care if he said he never went over there.
No, he said he went. He said.
Okay, well, if he said he went over, whatever the case, why?
The reason why he said he went over there because he told y'all I walked past it. I didn't see anyone in there, but I saw the lights on and I heard the printer going.
Are we sure that they didn't test his blood?
No, they didn't test him.
That's crazy. The fact that
they dropped the ball.
Y'all tested everyone else, but the actual person that did it, y'all just failed to test him.
But I don't think they didn't. I don't know if they did Clapman, the initial Bryce Clapman.
And that's the thing why I don't want to get stuck on it because I can't remember who all they tested. But
the main people they suspected, which was her boyfriend,
The
Ziegler, Ashley, and Allen, they tested.
yeah.
Because they were they main key people they suspected.
I mean, I get that, but it's a crime. It's a
But-
murder has happened. A crime.
But if
like,
y'all fully looked into two situations just to check their alibis, you would have got David alibi was completely a lie because you lied. Because first you lied about how you really talked to your girlfriend, but to be real, that was your girlfriend at the time. So she could have said, "Yeah, we talked for a while last night, but." Y'all end up getting married and y'all got divorced, and she could feel a certain type of way about you. So now she ain't gonna cover up. She's like, shit, we only talk for a couple minutes. I don't fuck that boy. You know what I'm saying? Fuck that fuck nigga. I don't even talk to that nigga no more. That's my
But
ex.
we would never know because they failed to even like ask.
And then, so if y'all had just investigated that more,
Yeah.
y'all could have found out there was a hole in his story with that one.
Yeah.
Also, if y'all just said, "Hey, how long does the printer stay open?" Y'all could have caught at that time, so y'all would have got him caught up in two lies that he wasn't being able to adjust
And
his
also
story
the
with.
blood.
And then
Like
would
we
make y'all
literally
check
have
the blood.
we have a speck of blood on this scene.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, child, but that's sad though.
But hey, man, make sure y'all spam us up. Let us know y'all thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below,
Please
man.
do.
But as always, y'all know how it go. I do go by the name DJ Nikki. This is
Here to go.
We are.
Kiss.
We are, y'all.
Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my folks. Dollar, 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 dollar.